World ignores Panem. A disturbing fan theory suggests that the rest of the world outside Panem still exists and simply chooses to ignore the horrors happening in North America. Panem is canonically located where the United States used to be, extending into parts of Canada and Mexico. Yet throughout the Hunger Games series, no mention is ever made of any countries outside Panem or attempts to contact the outside world. The theory draws parallels to real-world atrocities that other nations ignore or fail to intervene in, comparing Panem's situation to modern totalitarian regimes like North Korea. Citizens of Panem are taught to believe they are the last civilization on Earth, following climate disasters and wars. But the theory proposes this isolation could be enforced from within by the capital blocking communication, or from without, by the world choosing not to help. District 13's survival as an independent nation for 75 years proves that isolated nations can exist without others knowing. This theory adds a chilling layer of realism to the franchise, suggesting that the capital's greatest protection isn't military might, but international apathy. The possibility remains open because the source material deliberately leaves this ambiguous, never confirming what happened to the rest of the world or whether anyone outside Panem knows about the games. Katniss Hijacked. According to a dark theory from Reddit user lightning_fire, Katniss's love for Peeta might not have been real, but rather the result of accidental hijacking in the first arena. The theory proposes that Tracker Jacker Venom in the 74th Hunger Games accidentally conditioned Katniss to trust Peeta, much like the intentional hijacking used on him later. In Mockingjay, hijacking is revealed as a capital torture method using Tracker Jacker Venom to alter memories and emotions. Peeta is deliberately hijacked to hate Katniss by injecting him with venom while showing footage of her, creating a powerful negative association. The theory suggests that when Katniss was stung by Tracker Jackers and hallucinating in the first games, seeing Peeta warning her created an equally powerful positive association. This would explain why Katniss suddenly decides to act as star-crossed lovers after recovering from the stings, and it adds dark irony that if the capital hadn't created Tracker Jackers, Katniss might never have loved Peeta or thought of the berry strategy. Critics note that Katniss's feelings seem to grow stronger over time, rather than being sudden infatuation, and unlike Peeta's intentional hijacking with repeated exposure, Katniss would have experienced only primitive one-time exposure. This theory could be true because the books never explicitly address whether Tracker Jacker Venom can create positive associations, only showing its use for creating negative ones, leaving the mechanism ambiguous enough for this interpretation. Arena for Finnick. Fans theorize that Plutarch Heavensbee specifically designed the 75th Hunger Games arena to favor Finnick Odair and protect Katniss. The cornucopia was placed in the middle of salt water, requiring swimming to access weapons at the start of the games. Plutarch knew Katniss would immediately go for weapons at the cornucopia bloodbath, putting her in immediate danger. However, Finnick from District 4, the fishing district, was an expert swimmer who would reach the cornucopia first or second. In the film, Finnick is indeed one of the first tributes to the cornucopia, and protects Katniss during the initial fight, killing a tribute with his trident when they threaten the Alliance. As head game maker, Plutarch had the authority to design the arena however he wished, giving him complete control over its features. This theory reveals just how calculated the rebel plot was, suggesting every element of the arena was designed to keep Katniss alive while appearing fair to the capital. The possibility exists because we never see the original Quarter Quell card, and Plutarch's role as a rebel game maker means he had both motive and opportunity to manipulate the design. Foxface's death. One of the most popular theories suggests that Foxface didn't accidentally eat poisonous berries, but deliberately ended her own life to protect her family. During the training montage in the first film, Foxface is shown using a computer program to identify edible plants, demonstrating superior pattern recognition and plant knowledge. Her strategy throughout the games was stealth and intelligence, rather than direct combat, and she survived longer than most tributes by being clever and avoiding confrontation. The theory proposes she realized surviving the games was only half the battle, as victors faced trauma, exploitation, and continued capital control, exemplified by Haymitch's alcoholism and Annie's mental breakdown. Eating Peeta's nightlock berries gave her a quick, painless death that appeared accidental, and an accidental death wouldn't reflect poorly on her family in District 5, protecting them from potential capital punishment. Foxface's established intelligence makes a simple mistake seem completely out of character. This theory could be true because the films and books never explain why someone so careful about survival would eat unidentified berries, and her death is presented ambiguously enough that this interpretation remains valid. Lucy Gray Descendant. Fans speculate that Katniss Everdeen might be directly descended from Lucy Gray Baird, the protagonist of The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Both are from District 12 and share exceptional singing abilities, with Lucy Gray having originated the Hanging Tree song that Katniss later sings. Katniss also sings the Meadow Song, which is associated with Lucy Gray and the Covey. Lucy Gray was part of the Covey, a traveling musical group trapped in District 12, and Katniss inherits her musical talent from her father's side of the family. Lucy Gray's fate is deliberately left ambiguous as she disappears after her confrontation with young Coriolanus Snow, and an alternative version suggests Katniss might descend from Maud Ivory, Lucy Gray's cousin, which would still explain the musical connections. This theory creates a powerful thematic connection across the franchise, suggesting the spirit of rebellion against the Capitol has been passed down through Katniss's bloodline for 64 years. The possibility remains because Suzanne Collins deliberately left Lucy Gray's fate unresolved, and the numerous connections between the characters are too specific to be entirely coincidental. Career strategy. A Reddit theory proposes that Districts 1 and 2 don't dominate the Hunger Games because they're treated well, but rather they're treated well because they dominate the games. The theory suggests President Snow uses the games to identify which districts pose the greatest threat through annual combat assessment. Districts 1 and 2 consistently produce strong tributes, who win the majority of games across 74 years, with District 1 specializing in luxury goods, and District 2 in weapons manufacturing and peacekeeper training. These districts receive preferential treatment including better living conditions, food, and capital relationships. Career academies that train tributes from childhood are technically illegal, but the Capitol ignores this for Districts 1, 2, and 4. The theory proposes these academies also trained future Capitol enforcers and military personnel, meaning Snow keeps potential threats close by, rewarding their strength rather than punishing it. This strategy buys loyalty from the districts most capable of rebellion, and works for 74 years until Katniss's defiance sparks a different kind of resistance. This theory could be true because it explains a logical inconsistency in the world, as it makes little sense for the Capitol to allow illegal training unless it served their purposes, and the preferential treatment of dangerous districts aligns with real-world authoritarian strategies. Mockingjay Signal. A theory from Quora user Alicia Thibodeau suggests that the Mockingjay pin was given to Katniss by Madge Undersea as a deliberate signal from Madge's mother to Haymitch about the rebellion. Madge's aunt, Macy Lee Donner, was Haymitch's ally in the 50th Hunger Games before she died, and the Mockingjay pin originally belonged to Macy Lee before being passed to her niece, Madge. Macy Lee and Haymitch formed a bond during the games, similar to Katniss and Peeta's connection. The theory proposes that Madge's mother, who was Macy Lee's twin sister, orchestrated giving the pin to Katniss, because she knew Katniss was the right person to become the rebellion's symbol. The pin's symbolic significance was already established, as Mockingjays represented Capitol failure, since they had escaped Jabberjay mutts that the Capitol couldn't control. Haymitch would have recognized the pin and understood its meaning as a message from his deceased ally's family. The novel Sunrise on the Reaping reveals the pin was created by Tam Amber, a Covey member, connecting it to themes of freedom and the musical resistance that began with Lucy Gray. This theory could be true because the timing of the gift and the pin's symbolic history suggest deliberate planning, though the movie's change where Katniss buys the pin at a market complicates this interpretation for film audiences. By the way, if you're enjoying this so far, I post videos like this regularly. Subscribing would really help me out. Threat assessment. A Reddit theory suggests the Hunger Games serve a dual purpose, as entertainment and annual military intelligence gathering to assess each district's combat capabilities. The theory proposes Snow evaluates which districts pose rebellion threats by watching how their children perform in combat. The reaping system with Tesserae ensures tributes represent a cross-section of each district, including the desperate poor with multiple entries and potential leaders who volunteer. Training sessions show how quickly tributes adapt to weapons and combat tactics, while arena performance reveals district-specific skills like District 12's survival abilities, District 11's plant knowledge, and District 4's swimming. Career districts' consistent success proves their populations have combat training and resources, giving Snow valuable intelligence. Districts showing improvement over years would be flagged as potential threats, informing Capitol military strategy and peacekeeper placement. The 75th Games targeting victors could have been Snow's way of eliminating trained, proven threats who might lead a rebellion. This theory could be true because it adds pragmatic logic to the games beyond pure sadism, and the Capitol's strategic response to district rebellions suggests they do gather and act on intelligence about each district's capabilities. Tigris Rebel. Reddit user Innocent Subterfuge theorizes that Tigris was one of the original leaders of the Capitol Rebellion faction. Tigris was originally one of Coriolanus Snow's confidants, as shown in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but by the events of Mockingjay, her transformation into a human-tiger hybrid shows complete alienation from Capitol society. She goes from being Snow's supporter to openly pleased about Katniss's plan to kill him, and her shop in the capital becomes a safe house for Katniss's squad during the siege. The theory proposes she was recruiting Capitol sympathizers to the rebellion for years before Katniss's games. Her drastic physical modifications might have been punishment from Snow, or a deliberate disguise to avoid Capitol detection while organizing resistance. Snow's personal rejection of her, firing her as a tribute stylist, could have been the turning point that transformed her from supporter to enemy. This theory could be true because her extreme shift from Snow ally to rebel helper suggests a long period of planning rather than sudden conversion, and her willingness to risk everything by sheltering Katniss indicates deep commitment to the cause rather than simple opportunism. Haymitch's strategy. Fans theorize that Haymitch Abernathy deliberately sabotaged most of his tributes over the years to prevent the Capitol from having successful victors from District 12. As the only living victor from District 12 for 24 years, Haymitch served as mentor to approximately 48 tributes who all died, creating a pattern that seems statistically improbable. The theory suggests his alcoholism and apparent incompetence were an act to ensure District 12 tributes failed, sparing them from the trauma and exploitation that victors endure. Haymitch himself experienced severe punishment after winning his games by outsmarting the arena's force field, with Snow executing his entire family as retaliation. By ensuring no new victors emerged from District 12, he protected families from similar fates while maintaining his cover as a drunk who couldn't mentor properly. The theory proposes he only broke this pattern with Katniss and Peeta because he saw genuine potential for rebellion in Katniss's defiance. This theory could be true because Haymitch's sudden competence during the 74th Games contrasts sharply with his supposed 24-year failure rate, and his intimate knowledge of the Capitol's cruelty toward victors gives him clear motivation to protect tributes through failure rather than success. Effie's involvement. Some fans theorize that Effie Trinket was secretly sympathetic to the rebellion from early on and played a greater role than revealed. Throughout the Hunger Games and Catching Fire, Effie shows genuine care for Katniss and Peeta that seems unusual for a Capitol citizen, becoming emotionally invested in their survival beyond professional duty. Her devastation when they're forced back into the arena for the Quarter Quell appears deeper than mere disappointment in losing successful tributes. The theory suggests she may have been feeding information to Haymitch or Plutarch about Capitol plans and attitudes. In the Mockingjay films, the rebellion allows her to continue working with Katniss, suggesting they recognized her value or contributions. Her knowledge of Capitol social circles and fashion trends would have made her an ideal intelligence source, and her position as escort gave her access to information about tribute transport and schedules. This theory could be true because the films never fully explained why the rebellion trusted her enough to employ her, and her genuine emotional responses to Katniss and Peeta suggest deeper sympathies than a typical Capitol citizen would possess. British origins. A darker historical theory suggests that Panem emerged after Great Britain won the American Revolution and maintained colonial control for centuries through increasingly authoritarian means. The theory proposes that instead of American independence, the British Empire crushed the rebellion and destroyed Georgia as a show of force, then practiced strict mercantilism with active colonial presence for potentially hundreds of years. This extended colonial oppression eventually evolved into Panem's structure, with the capital representing the seat of imperial power and the districts serving as resource colonies. The theory draws parallels between the 13 districts and the 13 original colonies, with District 13's rebellion mirroring the historical attempt at independence. The capital's control mechanisms, including the Hunger Games, represent centuries of refined colonial oppression tactics. The location of the capital in the Rocky Mountains rather than on the former East Coast suggests a deliberate move away from historical American centers of power. This theory could be true because Panem is canonically set in North America, and the district system parallels colonial resource extraction, though the books never specify what actually happened to cause the formation of Panem, beyond vague references to disasters and wars. Coin's plan. The darkest and most supported theory suggests President Coin orchestrated Prim's death from the beginning, to break Katniss and eliminate Snow, securing her own path to power. Coin sent Prim, a young trainee medic, to the front lines during the Capitol siege, despite Katniss's objections and Prim's inexperience. The bombing that killed Prim used double explosion tactics, designed by Gale and Beatty, specifically to target medics who would rush to help victims of the first blast. Hovercrafts with Capitol insignia dropped the bombs, but during interrogation, Snow claimed he didn't order them, and told Katniss, I'm afraid we've both been played for fools. Coin had access to all of District 13's weapons, including Gale's bomb designs, and only she had the authority to deploy them against Capital children. Prim's death ensured Katniss would be mentally shattered and unable to threaten Coin's power, while simultaneously providing justification for Coin's plan to execute all Capital leaders. The plan backfired when Katniss realized the truth and killed Coin instead of Snow at the execution. Coin's proposal for a 76th Hunger Games using Capital children reveals her willingness to continue the same brutal cycle, just with different victims. This theory is heavily implied, if not outright confirmed, by the narrative through Snow's words, Coin's actions, and thematic parallels showing that Coin was every bit as dangerous as Snow, willing to sacrifice children to secure power. The possibility is so strong that many readers consider it canon, despite never being explicitly stated. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing so you catch every new video. Thanks for watching.